Johan, are you near? Voila. Come over on this side.
Hello.
Wonderful. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, you're all set. And we'll have a... Please make contact with me in about 50 minutes.
Okay, I'll try. Yeah. Okay. The main problem with mainstream technology at this moment is that it's not in harmony with the environment. The defining feature of the technology we talk about in this conference is that it restores that harmony, that natural balance. In order to define, in order to be able to create technology that is in balance with nature, we need to understand nature. And that is what this lecture is all about. How does nature actually work? These two genius men helped us direct the way, I think. Who of you is not familiar with one of these, or hopefully both of them? Everybody? Whoa. Okay. And it will be a short presentation today. I like to start with the work of Plato. Plato lived about 2,400 years ago in what we now call Greece, in Athens. And this is famous allegory of the cave. Probably you've read about it. And to me, this explains the whole of reality. Because we are like the prisoners. We are sitting here, if you can see the little dot. We are sitting here and we can only see the shadows at the back of the wall, projected on the wall. And we think that those shadows, that is in fact the real world. And we have no clue that there is something behind our head there that is in fact projecting these shadows. That is in fact the true nature of our reality. And there is a third part, which is the fire. Because if the fire was not there, we could not see any shadows at all. So to me, this allegory shows that our reality is a trinity of three different worlds. The third world, the outer world, that's what I call the shadow world. And the shadow world seems to be very real to us. We can sit on the chairs, we can interact with each other in that shadow world. But they are not on their own. If the world in front of the shadows was gone, the shadows would be gone too. That world in front of the shadow world, I call it the proto-world. Proto is Latin meaning first or foremost. And in the proto-world we find the causes of all effects in this shadow world. The problem with mainstream science is that it doesn't take into account the proto-world, and it tries to explain everything in the shadow world, which is totally impossible. Because you cannot explain a shadow if you don't know where the shadow is coming from. The origin of everything we find in the source world. And that's the most difficult part to explain what it is, but I'll try anyway today. But you can also call it the creator, or you can even say God or Allah or whatever you like to call. But that's in fact the source where everything is coming from. As I said before, mainstream science is focusing only on the shadows, the shadow world. So there we find physics, chemistry, astronomy. But in front of the shadow world we find what is called the veil. The veil that hinders us, that blocks us to see beyond what is in this shadow world. We cannot see past it. If we could, we would understand what in fact is metaphysics about, or alchemy, or astrology. These subjects have been expelled from universities long time ago. But I think they are more real in understanding the whole of reality than physics and chemistry at this moment. And of course there are many others, like numerology, enneagram, feng shui. The previous presentation we saw a lot about organ. You can also call it chi, ki, prana, or whatever you like to call it, or frill. All the names were there. That doesn't belong to our shadow world. It exceeds the limitations of this world. It comes from the world in front of that. But what is in fact even the source of everything? I will not talk a lot about religion today, but that source is of course the creator. You could say the will of the creator. Or Walter Russell calls it the universal stillness, or the universal mind. That is in fact creating everything. And the will of the creator is very simple. It's just rhythmic, balanced interchange. Russell says if you need one word to explain the will or to describe the will, it is balance. And if you need 2 words, then it will be rhythmic balance. And if you need 3 words, then it will be rhythmic balanced interchange. That's what it's all about. And I will show in this presentation what does in fact mean. These 3 worlds together, studying that is the subject of holy science. I write holy with a W and a double L, but it means exactly the same as without the W and a double L. It is beyond the limitations of this shadow world, and it includes the will of the Creator. It's also the title of my latest book in English. It's lying there on one of the tables. If you want to see it, it's there. Victor Schauberger watched nature very carefully, and he saw that everything is in fact moving like a spiral. All movement is curved, all direction is curved. And that's the same conclusion what Russell drew. So we are so thinking that everything is linear and straightforward, but in nature everything is curving and going round and around in spirals. In order to understand a spiral, you need to see that something is going in and something is going out. Something is spiraling to a so-called 0 point in the center, and from that 0 point on, it's spiraling outwards again. So there is an incoming movement and an outgoing movement. And they are in balance with each other, because everything that's going in is going out at the same time. Or in this showing later. The incoming movement, let us call that yin. And the outgoing movement, let us call that yang. So we see that everything in nature, in the whole of reality, is an interaction between yin and yang. Most people are familiar with that, but it's also very basic science, because the incoming movement is yin and the outgoing is yang. When we take the perspective from the middle of this shape in here, if you can see the red dot, then we see that the spiral is coming towards us. And if we could see the direction, we would see that it was going counterclockwise. It's going like this. Where's the thing? Oh, it's not really clear. It's going counterclockwise towards us. And if we look the other direction, we see that it's going clockwise away from us. That's standard. So I call the yin energy, or the yin phase I can better say, positive, and I call the yang negative. Because we can look at this as it is our bank account. Something is coming in, money is coming in, that's positive. While money that is going out is negative, because we have then less money. And the same is it with the energy that is coming in. So yin is positive and yang is negative. In the classic literature it's reversed, and I'll explain later on why it was reversed. As I said before, if something is coming in, at the same time something is going out as well, because nature likes to keep things in balance. So it's a continuous interaction between incoming and outgoing. For instance, if we look at the water spiral, we see the water spiraling going down, but we don't see the air that is spiraling up at the same time. It's a dual spiral. Water down, air is going up. That's why it's spiraling. And it keeps balanced like that. And it would look a little bit like this, something going in and out at the same time. I hope you're not hypnotized by now. So this is in fact what I try to show. The source I represent with a circle, a perfect circle, with everything in it, the universal stillness, as Russell calls it. In the proto-world we find the dynamics of spiraling movements, spiraling in and out at the same time. That's creating the duality we see in this shadow world, the duality between up and down, left and right, and so on. And that's the duality of yin and yang, or Tao, or Tao, some people say Tao. So this is the source of everything, the source world. And you can call it the origin, or in Latin, origo, which has 2 O's, and O is to me again the whole of everything. Or you can also say omni, also starting with an O. This is the second world, the proto-world. Please understand that this is an internal view, because we look from inside, from the core, from the 0 point, to the outer world. So it's an internal view. This is the external view, and then we see the yin and yang dynamics. It's in fact the same, but it's now the shadow, because we take a different perspective. When we put our left hand in front of the mirror, you can see it here, then our thumb is on the right side, seen from the back of the hand. But the hand on the other side has the thumb on the other side. So the reflection of our left hand is in fact a right hand. Maybe we were not aware of that when we put it in front of the mirror because we think it's the same hand, but it is in fact it's a right hand. And the same happens when energies go through the wheel, or movement, I can better say movement. So when we have yin or positive or downward spiral at the top in the world above, then we see the opposite, black or negative or upward spiral in the world below. Maybe you've heard about as above, so below, from Hermes Trismegistus, long time ago. That's in fact about this. The world below is a mirror image of the world above, but the mirror is somehow taking things upside down. And that's why I call yin positive, because I talk about the world above and not the world below. In the world below, it's just the opposite. And there we see that's in fact the same. So here we see the spiral going like this. Here we take the internal perspective, so we see something coming towards us, which is positive, something going away from us, which is negative. But here we take the external perspective. And then we see something going inside something, disappearing. We can call it a black hole. We call it negative because it's going away. And here we see something coming out of something. For instance, the sun. We see the light coming out of the sun. And we call it positive. Hope this makes any sense. It's just a different perspective, but it's in fact the same. So here we see the three worlds again. Original worlds, everything starts from there. And then it splits. It is as if nature decides, okay, this will be up or this will be down. This will be yin or this will be yang. And it happens at the same time. They are still somehow connected, but now they are split into two. And that split gives a shadow in the shadow world. And here we see how things are opposite. The image or the reflection of yang becomes white, positive, while the reflection of yin becomes black, negative. Here we see the two worlds, the world above and the world below. The positive energy is called the reviving energy. Or what in the previous lecture it was called POR, P-O-R. Yeah, positive organ. That's the positive life force. On the other side, everything in nature has to be balanced. There's also a negative life force. And that's taking away the life. And that's perishing. Doesn't mean that one is good and the other is bad. In nature, it doesn't really matter whether it's good or bad, just that it's in balance. So if there is life, there's also ending of life, or life-giving, and ending of life. And those energies create, in fact, what we see in this planet as day and night, one dimension of time. Or light and darkness, or heating and cooling. It's all related to this duality. And in China, we use lines to signify, to symbolize it. An unbroken line, a straight line, is yang, is male, while the broken line is female, is yin. So please understand that this is the world above and this is the world below. In the world below we see all the manifestations. Everything we see in this reality, whether it's fixed or not fixed, it's in fact a shadow of something else. I need a little bit of water. So what we see is the duality between heating and cooling. And that is not just going from one to the other, it's in fact a cycle. And the cycle goes like this. Heating objects radiate. Radiating objects repel. Repelling objects expand. Expelling objects cool. Cooling objects accumulate. Accumulating objects attract. Attracting objects contract. And contracting objects heat. And there are many other words you can use in this natural cycle, but we need to understand that they are connected. Heating is connected to cooling, while radiating is connected at the opposite to accumulating, repelling to attracting, and expanding to contracting. This is in fact very important to understand. I will not elaborate a lot on this, but this is the duality we find in nature. One half of this, from heating all the way to cooling, that is in fact what we call magnetism. And the other half, from cooling all the way up to heating, that is what we call electricity. They are two sides of the same coin. Current science, university science, treats them as two totally different phenomena, though they are a little bit related, but they are two sides of the same coin. And there are two different forces at work. This is a centrifugal force, bringing everything further away from the core, and the other one is a centripetal force, bringing everything closer to the core. And it's like a harmonica, it's going in and out all the time. This is in fact the way nature works, and if we understand this, then it's very easy for us to make technology that is in line with this. So that is in fact what yin and yang is all about. It's about the duality, the interaction, the dynamics between magnetism and electricity. Or you can also say love and wisdom, because to me electricity is love, is light, and magnetism is information, is wisdom. I will explain that later on. So the source splits itself into two, and when there is electricity, there's also magnetism. When there is yin, there's also yang. But they are somehow apart from each other. But they are still, in fact, originating from the same. And within both, we find another duality, because in electricity we have the positive pole and the negative pole, or the anode and the cathode. Anode is Greek, I think, or Latin, I'm not sure, for way up, while a cathode is way down. So it's going up and down. It's connected to the same. And in the same way, we find the outgoing pole where the magnetic lines go out, and the incoming pole where the magnetic lines go in. So out again means yang, and mostly we use the red color for that, and yin is in, and we use the blue color. So the duality between magnetism and electricity is increased into further duality between two different poles. There's another duality, and that's the duality between current and field. There's a static form of energy and a dynamic form. The static form is current, and the dynamic form, the dynamic is current and the static is field. And we're all familiar with electricity being a current. Most people use the same word. But current and electricity are not the same, because there's another form of electricity, and that is, of course, static electricity. And then electricity is in a field form, not dynamic, but static. And the same is true for magnetic. Mostly when we talk about magnetism, we only think of the magnetic field, but that's a static version of it. There's also a dynamic one, and that's called the magnetic current. Who of you have heard about magnetic current before? Okay, thank you very much. Edward Leeds-Cullen was a fantastic guy. He created this coral castle. It's still open for public. And he was able to move gigantic blocks and create beautiful things out of it. He was able to somehow put gravity off, and those gigantic objects were floating in the air. He was actually pushing them through the air, which is totally impossible according to our own understanding. But maybe our own understanding is a little bit limited. He was able to somehow switch gravity off and was created this beautiful castle. And he wrote a book called Magnetic Current. It's still available. Just Google it and you can find it in a PDF form and you can read it. It's a little bit complicated, but it shows you that magnetism also has a dynamic version. This is what we know. We know, or at least we agreed, that electricity is going from positive to negative. The current is going from plus to minus. And when that occurs, we see a magnetic field around that current. And the direction is with a simple rule. It's always going with the standard movement. So here we see that electricity creates magnetism. And that effect is called, that phenomenon is called electromagnetism. But the other way is also true. When we are making magnetic fields movement, then we create, in fact, electricity. And that is called magnetoelectricity. So here again we see how both are complementary to each other. Magnetism creates electricity, electricity creates magnetism. Maybe you've seen the experiment where you have a rope connected to the wall and the other one is oscillating with a certain frequency. And then you see at particular frequencies that there are arising notes. Stable points in the rope. Here you see, not sure where's the, here you see one node in the middle. This is going up and down very fast. Hope you see my dot there. Going up and down very fast, but in the middle it seems to be standing still. And when you double that frequency, then you see that there are in fact two more. That there are in fact two nodes in the rope. This is all about resonating waves. When the waves are resonating, then we see that there are nodes arising. So we have nodes and we have antinodes. That's the space between the nodes. In Dutch we say belly. We call this a belly, but it's in fact the antinode. So what is matter, or what is a particle? Particle is just a node in the dynamics of movement. Here we see the duality between particles and waves. And the particle is just the node in the dynamics, the vibrating energies. Here the energy is going in, and there the energy is going out. And that very easily explains why all particles have a spin, or why our home planet is spinning. Where does the energy come from? Universities have no answer to that. Sorry? Okay. So that's the reason. It's spiraling in the same direction. So of course, whatever that is spiraling also in that same direction. And it can have a one-way spin or another way spin. And then we have two versions. Again, that is yin and yang. So we have the perishing and the reviving forces at the other side of the veil. And we have particles and waves on this side of the veil. Now let's go to the movements. We have, in fact, 4 different movements. Not only yin and yang, but it's more complicated because it's going also inside and outside. So here we see from the top, let's call this a planet. From the North Pole to the center of the planet, in the heart, we find one movement. Then from the heart in the planet to the South Pole, that's the inner-out movement. So those are 2 movements inside, underneath the surface of the planet. Then we have 2 movements on the surface of the planet, or outside, from the South Pole to the equator, here, and from the equator all the way to the North Pole. So there are 4 phases of energy. And those phases have been given names long time ago by our ancestors. Those are the 4, some people call it energies, I prefer to call it secondary forces, because primary forces are yin and yang, and the secondary forces are earth, air, water, and fire. And it's very important to understand these 4 secondary forces, because they create, in fact, the shadows, their interactions. Those symbols I use, they come from alchemy. Maybe you've seen them before. And in fact, we've seen the triangle pointing down is female, is yin, and the triangle pointing up is male, is yang. And the 2 lines in the middle, here and here, signify that those energies are in fact in the middle, underneath the surface. So, to me it makes very much sense. Here again we see the symbol for yin and yang, or Tao, or Dao. Yang means out, yin means in, or negative, positive, or with the triangles pointing upwards, pointing downwards, or with the lines, as I said before. All mean the same. They're all symbolizing the difference between yin and yang. But this beautiful symbol in the middle is not only showing the dynamics between yin and yang, but also the dynamics between earth, air, water, and fire. And then we have to look at the small dots. Because the small black dot represents the energy phase, or the secondary force of air, while the big black drop around it, that's in fact fire. That's the energies or the movement we see on the outside. And the same is true for the yin forces. Earth is a small dot in the middle, while the big white drop is representing water. So we not only see the 2 primary forces, yin and yang, here we also see the 4 secondary forces, earth, air, water, and fire. Maybe you've heard about this prayer. Some people who go to church or used to do that a long time ago. There's another prayer. It's called Our Mother Who Art in Earth. It's nearly the same prayer. If you go to my website, you can find both of them. The second prayer is not present in the collection of book called the Bible. You can find it in the Essene Gospel of Peace. Yeah, you can look it up, you can find it online. Of course, we all know who our mother is. I think most of you do know. I call our home planet Terra. to not confuse it with the energy of Earth, because that's a different energy. In fact, terra is Latin for Earth, so it's in fact the same, but it seems a little bit different. So Terra, to me, is the name of our home planet. You can also say Gaia, and Gaia means Mother Terra. And our home planet consists mostly on the surface of water. And when we look at her from space, we see that she's very blue. Bluish planet. So she's representing water, the energy of water, or the face of water. And Earth, of course, means Earth. And those two are the female, the yin energies. So the prayer, Our Mother who art in Earth, and it goes on, down name and so on, is in fact a prayer to the yin energies. What we see in the Bible, that most things that refer to the female, to the yin, have been excluded. To suppress the yin, the females. And the things that refer to the male, to the yang energies, they are somehow pushed forward. That is not in balance. So the Bible is not really in balance at the moment. The other prayer, we see Our Father who art in heaven. Heaven means the air we see around us. So that's the energy phase of air. And Our Father must be then fire. To me, Our Father who art in heaven is not God. I will explain later what to me is God. Our Father who art in heaven is the planet, or the star, I can better say, I call Helios. And if you look carefully at the scriptures, and many other people talk about that, that is in fact also Jesus. I hope you'll not get angry with me. But this is the risen Savior. This is God's Son. Not with an O, but with a U in the middle. That's what it's all about. When we play a game with cards, we can see the same four energy phases, the same secondary forces. Because spades is in fact an arrow pointing upwards. So spades means one. Hearts is in fact connecting of two sides. So hearts means two. Clubs means of course three. And diamonds means four sides. So this is the first phase after the 0 point. This is the second, this is the third, and that is the fourth. That cannot be a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. Coincidence is just misunderstood dynamics. There must be a very simple explanation. And again, we see the female, the yin phase, phases. It's not really working. Oh, anyway, the red color here is showing the female, and the black one is calling the male. So we see the duality between energy and matter being the same. And some guy thought of a formula to somehow interchange between those two a long time ago. Here we see the four energies, or the four secondary forces. And they are the same, they correspond to the states of aggregation. In general, we only know the under three, but plasma is the fourth one. When we take, for instance, H2O, water, under 0 degrees Celsius or 33 degrees Fahrenheit, it is solid, it's ice. On top of that it's liquid, and above the 100 degrees Celsius it becomes gas. And when we ionize that gas, it becomes plasma. So these are indeed the four phases of energy. 96.3% of all living matter consists of these four elements. So these are very important. And they also correspond to one of the four secondary forces. And we can even continue, because we have four different types of energy. Kinetic energy is corresponding to earth, while chemical energy is responding to air. And then we have magnetic energy, as I said before, related to water, and fire is related to electricity, electric energy. This is the illusion that we see when we study things. We in fact only see nodes in a dynamic field. And quantum physics came up with four different kinds of forces that somehow keep everything together. And those forces need particles to transfer that force. To me, I mostly make jokes about it, to me this is not science, to me this is science fiction. Because those forces are fictionless and those particles are fictionless too. Some don't even have weight, mass. They're massless. So it's a little bit strange for a particle to be massless. To me, those four forces are nothing more than reflections of the secondary forces. And then again we see earth, air, water, and fire. And some scientists say that weak nuclear force and electromagnetic force are in fact somehow connected. Well, that's true, because there are two male forces, so they are indeed somehow connected. It goes a little bit too far to explain all of this, but to me it makes very much sense. So let's go back to the shadow worlds and the other worlds as well. The primary forces, being yin and yang, we find on the other side of the veil. We cannot detect it, we can only see the shadows of them. And also do we see the secondary forces there, earth, air, water, and fire. Matter, energy, the different forms of energy, and the forces I just said before, the electromagnetic force, for instance, that's the things we find in the shadow world. But they are caused by things in the proto world, in the world in front of that. So what does the source world then mean? The source worlds we find omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient. Yeah, some people give these attributes to God. I think it's true, but you should not think of God as a man with a beard and saying you're right and you're wrong. That's a very, very strange way to see it. God is something different, I think. But these qualities, in fact, do match to the Creator. As I said before, Walter Russell calls it the universal mind, or the universal stillness, where everything is inside. You can also see it as the 0 point, where in fact is that universal stillness. And in order to somehow capture the will of the Creator, we need information. So in one word, what is representing the source world? To me, it's ether. We saw it in the previous presentation as well, but I like to write it with an A at the start to not confuse it with a substance ether, because this is clearly not available in this world, the shadow world. So here we see the 5 elementary forces. Some call it the elements, but the elements I will explain that later on. Fire and water, they dominate the proto world. That is the world of electricity and magnetism. That is in fact the world at the other side of the veil. And everything in the universe is in fact created by those 2 forces. If you know about the work of the electric universe, then you know that electricity is the most powerful force in the universe, and it's not gravity, as the old science is still thinking. That is not true. These are the 2 forces that in fact play the game on the other side of the veil. And we see the shadows. And the shadow world we see is dominated by air and water. Air and earth. Yeah, when we go outside, we see earth being under us and air being up us. So the world we perceive is the duality between air up and earth down from the surface of our planet. And the source world is then, of course, ether. Ether is information, and there are 4 different ways to store information. We started with clay tablets. At least this generation started with clay tablets. But we also used the record player or the gramophone records. Maybe you still remember those things. Yeah, you put a needle on top of it, you make it rotate, and then you could hear a song, music. Then we switched from the records to the tapes, to the cassettes. And we switched from earthly storage, physical storage, to magnetic storage. In the previous lecture, the work of Masaru Emoto was mentioned. He shows that water indeed has memory. It is able to store information. And we are full of water, about 70%. So we are full of information in that water. So that's in fact the magnetic way of storing information. And we can easily erase it. Water can also be erased, information in that, and then you make it spin differently. You can see the spinning water there from the work of Frank Bonte on the table outside. We also have wave transmission. Then we send information through the air with frequencies, low frequencies, and we can pick them up. Also information. And of course the fourth one, we created the discs, the compact discs, which is in fact an electro or a photo way of storing information. We call it digital. But in fact it's electric. So these are the 4 ways of storing information. Ether can be expressed in earth, air, water, or fire. Here are the 5 energies now together. We see the most intangible one being ether and the most tangible one being earth. That's the horizontal dimension. The most heating one is of course fire, and the most cooling one is water. That's down. So that's also a dimension, the vertical one. Maybe you know about these subjects, these forms, these objects. These are called the Platonic solids. Those are the 5 perfect 3-dimensional shapes with the same amount of edges, faces, and angles. Oh, this one. They are called, in ancient names, tetrahedron, meaning 4. This has 4 sides. I'll just put it here, 4 faces. This one we know, the hexahedron, some call it the cube, has 6 faces. You can play a game with it. Dice. Octahedron, 8 faces. Dodecahedron, 12. And icosahedron, 20 faces and 12 edges. There's a lot of, I can talk a lot about this, but I will not do that because of the time too. But they correspond to the 5 elementary forces. The one with the most faces is water, and the one with the least faces is fire. Those are the 2 opposites when we count the faces. And this has been known for mankind for very, very long. When we go to the Vedas, the ancient scriptures from India, we see the names referring to that. And as I said before, ether represents information. Maybe you've heard about the Akasha records. That's information. Akasha just means information. So ether is information. And when we use information, then we are able to influence the world in front of the veil. And by doing that, we also change the world at this side of the veil. That's all. So back to this picture again. What we see in this world, this side of the veil, are just effects caused by things that happen the other side of the veil. Dynamics of the forces. And they originate from the source world. Here we see matter and motion. Here are the proto-forces. I call them together, the primary and the secondary forces, I call the proto-forces. And the mind is here. So we all have a mind. We are in fact also here. That is why we can create our own reality. We are kind of God, because with our mind we influence the proto-world, we influence the forces, the electromagnetic field around us and everything, every energy is around us. And by doing so, we in fact change our own reality. Maybe you've seen the DVD of The Secret or many other things. That is in fact showing what we can do. We are not locked up here like prisoners. No, we are in fact here too. The whole world belongs to us. And we can connect with up and down by meditation or somehow adjusting ourselves to those energies. Because the energy we find up is the energy of fire, up in the sky, up in heaven. And the energy we find down under us is water. Water of our home planet, Earth. And we can connect those two. And we can do that, we can connect between our father Helios and our mother Terra through the rainbow bridge. And that rainbow bridge is in fact our chakra system. The color of our father up in heaven is ultraviolet. And the color, the energetic color of our crown chakra is violet. So they're directly on top of each other. And the same is true at the bottom. The color of our mother is infrared. That's the heat energy she's vibrating, radiating. And the color of our lowest chakra, our base chakra, or root chakra I think, is red. This is not some fake idea from India or China. This is in fact hardcore science when we look at the endocrine glands. And the function of these glands is to produce hormones. And those hormones are the bridge between the ethery world and the physical world. Because the word hormone comes from Greek hormao, means in motion, bringing in motion. So what the hormones do is they bring our physical body in motion on based of the energies we perceive around us. That's all. There's a lot of confusion about the position because some people actually think that there is an hormone at the top or an endocrine gland on the top of our head here. But there's no hormone here, or gland here. In fact, the pituitary gland is below the pineal gland, but the entrance is on top. That's why it's the 7th chakra and not the 6th one. And the same is true at the bottom. The adrenal gland is even above the pancreas. So it's not the lowest gland, but it's the lowest chakra because the entrance is coming from under. And you can see that here. The orientation of the 5 chakras in the middle, they are horizontal. So the energy is coming from the front or from the back. The other ones, the other 2, are pointing either upwards or downwards. So that's a vertical direction. And it's very important to understand that difference. Yeah, well, you can see the picture here. And the root chakra also gets energy through our legs. I can feel energy coming in through my feet, going to my body. And I can also feel it tinkling on my head when the energy is coming down. Maybe you have the same experience. You can actually feel the energies coming in through your chakra system. So here we see the same chakras, 7 chakras again. The one at the bottom is coming, a spiral is coming in towards us. That's for everybody the same. And the one on top, spiral is coming inwards. So that's same, whether you're a yin or yang. Whether you're typical yin or typical yang. I will explain now typical yin and typical yang in a very old-fashioned, traditional, heterosexual, male-female way. So please don't be offended, but it's more easy to explain it this way. If you want to see it more in another way, it's also good. Yeah. So don't. I hope I make myself clear now. If you look at the sexual chakra, the one less at the bottom, you see that the energy from the male is going outwards, while in the female it's going inwards. Maybe you know a little bit about the way human species are reproducing themselves, but there you see that something is going out of the male and something is coming into the female, and that's in fact what's standing here. So the orientation of that chakra is different whether you're male or female. The yellow one, you can also call it money, to explain a little bit more. In a typical relation, the male brings the money in and the female brings the money out again. So it's not good or bad. That's just the way the chakra is oriented. So it's very normal, very natural. And when you look at the heart chakra in the middle, I call it the chest chakra, then you see that the typical male is supposed to go out, to send energy out, to attract a female that somehow matches with that male. And if the female does the opposite, if the female is going out, then she gets all kinds of silly names, which I will not repeat here. But throat chakra, now we see that it's going out from the female. That's why men are getting so much tired of women talking too much, because that's not what they really like. And fifthly, vision. Typical female, typical yin expects from the typical male to have vision. Where are we going? What is our plan? If the male doesn't have that, then the female doesn't really like to be with that kind of male. So I hope it makes a little bit sense to you. It does to me. Our Father who art in heaven is sending energy down to us, and our Mother who art in earth sending energy up. And that's all coming into the center. And that's the level of consciousness. Underneath the consciousness level, we find the subconsciousness level. And there we find the psyche. I study psychology, but psychology in fact means the study of the psyche. Well, I've not learned much about the psyche at the university, because it was all about perceiving, thinking and feeling and what can go wrong with those functions. So it's about consciousness, not about subconsciousness. And on top of that, we find super consciousness. And that's the inspiration. We get inspired. A spiral is coming in. Inspiration, that's the word meaning. Spiritual, spirit, meaning fire. So the fire is up, water is down. And this is our higher self and this is our lower self. I'll focus now on these 4 in the middle, perceiving, feeling, thinking and acting. And they correspond to the 4 energies or the secondary forces I saw before. Perceiving is earthly energy. Feeling is water. You can feel it on your water. That's a Dutch saying. Not sure if it's in English true. Thinking is more air. Yeah, we can sell people fried air and get a lot of money for that. It's okay, because it's a good idea, and the idea can be worth something, but it's air. Yeah, it's not earth. And some people value it less because it's not earth, but it's also something. It's air. thinking. And acting means fire. If you have no fire, if you have no energy, then you cannot do anything at all. Yeah, you're sitting, but you're not able to do. So you need the 4 energies to do anything. Yeah, that's it. Okay, I have to round up, sorry. Difference between passive and active, below and above. Yeah, this is the world below, acting and perceiving, and this is the world above, feeling and thinking. Then we're on the other side of the wheel. These are the 5 elementary forces, and these are the 5 elements. I have to rush a little bit, but they totally match. Ether means metal, because they both connect. Yeah, we used to connect with metal, with copper wires to telephone, or to send a telegraph. Now we use cordless. Cord and cordless is in fact the same, metal or ether. And wood and air both want to expand. Air wants to get out, wants to take space, and wood wants to expand too. That's why you see a lot of things growing in spring. So it's the same. And these energies, they play along. Easy way to explain it in an elementary way. Fire leaves ashes, that's food for earth. Earth creates metals. Metal is somehow feeding water. Water feeds wood, of course, otherwise wood dies. Nature dies, the plant dies. And wood, of course, if you put a log on the fire, the wood is feeding the fire. So that's the positive, round, female, yin, nutritious, nourishing interaction between the 5 elements. But there's also a male one. And the male is doing the opposite. It's controlling. It's taking away the life force. Yeah, fire is controlling metal. You can make it heating it up, and then you can change the form. With a metal axe, you can cut down a tree. With shelves, you can try to control the earth, not to fall in. With earth, you can try to keep water out. That's what we do here in the Netherlands, because if there were no dikes, half of this country would be underwater. And water is able to control fire. You can make the fire go out. So that's the negative one, positive one. In nature, they are in balance, but in our society, they are not. Because we focused too much on the red arrows, and we forgot all about the green ones. So what we are doing is we're taking away the life force more and more and more. When we, for instance, create electricity, we do that by making magnetic fields rotate, and that's what we do with kinetic energy. When I'm on a bicycle and I cycle home, the top of my wheel is rotating and the top of my dynamo is rotating as well. That's all kinetic energy. And inside the dynamo, magnetic fields are rotating as well. And then the magnetic starts to rotate, and that's creating an electric current. That's the way we create electricity. And we can do it also with chemical explosions. It's going like this. It's the same. Or with wind, because chemical is also air, so wind can also make the windmill go around. That's not green energy, it's the same red energy. And when we go to a hospital, we get chemical pharmaceuticals that are suppressing the physical symptoms we have. That's this red arrow. Yeah? There are many other ways to look after your health, but this is one way. So to cut a long story short, we focus too much on the red arrows in this beautiful symbol. And it's time that we reinvent the green ones, because I think in the old age we knew all about the green ways to let the energies play, and we focus too much now on the male, the dominating ways. So we need to bring back balance here. And when we do that, then we will do something in alignment with the will of the Creator. And the Creator, as I said before, this is the last slide, is balance, is rhythmic balance interchange. Thy will be done on earth as heaven means let us bring back this rhythmic balance into our lives. Thank you very much.